Alright, hey guys, what is up? Welcome to what is Friday, and another full week of remote learning. One thing I want to talk about really quickly is that our numbers for participation, attendance, and work handed in are on a strong decline, okay? It does take a lot of effort to create the work for you guys, to make these videos, and so it's just kind of frustrating for me to have all of that work kind of like go unrecognized. Like, imagine if you guys are doing all this hard work and I just wasn't grading anything. So it's kind of the same deal there. Please make sure that you guys are logging in every day. Please make sure you're watching the videos, and please make sure you're submitting work with attachments. The other thing, we started a new text. This is Woods Runner. You guys have a full PDF version of Woods Runner uploaded with every lesson that we've done so far for Woods Runner. Some of you are still writing about Maddie Rose. Maddie Rose was in the Scarlett Stocking Spy. We are no longer in the Scarlett Stocking Spy. So for those of you who have written about Maddie Rose, it's a very easy way for me to tell you that you have not read Woods Runner. Woods Runner focuses around Samuel. And now I'm sure everyone will go, oh man. Well, it shouldn't be an oh man type of moment. You should just be reading the books that I'm giving you at the time you're supposed to be doing them, and actually doing your work with some effort and like you care. Okay? So we are moving on to lesson 22 today. And we're going to stay within the first 3 chapters of Woods Runner, which for many of you might be good, because from what I've seen so far, not all of you have read chapters 1 through 3. So you get another opportunity to read them again today. And our content framing question is, what is happening in chapters 1 through 3 of Woods Runner? Pretty simple. You guys will be working with 2 handouts today. Handout 22A and Handout 22B. Handout 22A is just for you guys. It's just text-dependent questions, aka RAX responses, from these 3 chapters. You guys should be able to answer those on your own, and you don't need me to model it for you. The other handout, 22B, is about communication. Okay, because based on the fact that this is a historical fiction text, this is 1776, there were obviously no telephones, no cell phones, no computers, no emails, no texts, no nothing. Okay, so it's important to see how people communicated during these times. All right, so we're going to get into handout 22A and just 22B rather in just a minute. Now, a word that I said in the last video that I was going to talk about is the word frontier. This word has been mentioned quite a lot so far in Woods Runner. And frontier is the limit of settled land where there is wilderness. So at this point in time in American history, if you're looking at the map of the United States, which I can quickly kind of draw for you. Imagine that's the U.S. Right? And that's as we know it today. Not the best picture, just a quick sketch, right? But at this time, we know of 13 colonies. And we've talked about this, that the 13 original colonies were all along the East Coast. So this is the Atlantic Ocean, and over here is the Pacific Ocean, which no one really even knows about yet. So we're focused here on the Atlantic Ocean, and then I will use red here, because right in here are the 13 colonies. And again, that's New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, everything, Maryland, everything in there, okay? Your 13 colonies. But eventually, you can kind of see here that the 13 colonies end. And the 13 colonies were the settled land, meaning that people lived there, they used it, it was claimed as like, hey, this is our land. So frontier is basically anything past this settled area. This was the frontier. It's kind of like the edge of where people lived. Okay, so this was the frontier. And the definition then continues saying, referring to the western United States before westward expansion. So what happened is that we had the 13 colonies, but eventually more people started coming to the United States, and there was not as much room, so people had to keep moving west and moving west and moving west, eventually until they got to California. Okay, so that's how kind of our country came to be and how we can deal with the word frontier. Now, for those of you who did read, the last 2 pages of chapter 3 take us into the second part of the text, which is the red section for war. Okay, so at this point Samuel has moved into kind of like a new era of the book, and we're going to learn more about that as we move forward. Now, handout 22B, and you guys are rereading chapters 1 through 3 today, because the handout 22A, the RACS questions, the text dependent questions, are covering all 3 chapters. Now, handout 22B, page 12, communication. So if you have the document up, I would go there to page 12. Or actually, it's not going to be page 12 for you guys, but wherever you see this, communication, like that little subheading, okay? So wherever you see communication, just scroll through chapter 1. It's actually the last page of chapter 1, okay? Your job today is going to be, obviously, to reread page 12, okay? And when you reread page 12, you're going to work on the left-hand side of the chart. So, and what you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking for, how did people in colonial America get their news, okay? And you're going to jot down ways that people got their news. And I forgot a question mark here. So I am looking for, how did people in colonial America get their news, okay? I will read this section, communication, to you. In the year 1776, the fastest form of travel for any distance of over 30 or 40 miles was by ship. With steady wind, a sailing vessel could clock 100 to 200 miles a day for weeks on end. A horse could cover 30, maybe even 40 miles a day, although not for an extended period without breaking down. Basically meaning that the horse, you could use a horse for 30 miles a day, but eventually the horse is going to be like, I can't do it anymore. At best, coaches could do 100 miles in a 24-hour day by changing horses every 10 or 15 miles, but only if the roads were in good shape, which they almost never were. So coaches are kind of like the big wagons, okay? If you're confused on what a coach is, you can look it up, and you can just Google image what a coach is. A man could walk 20 or 30 miles a day, faster for short periods, but always depending on conditions of land, weather, and footgear. 15 miles a day was standard. So there was no fast and dependable way to transmit information in those years. No telegraph, no telephone, no internet, no texting, no overnight delivery services. Okay? And it's important to notice that Gary Paulson, in this communication page, is giving you kind of the back and forth between story and history that we talked about when we first started. It might take 5 or 6 days for knowledge of an important event to move just 10 miles. Carried by a traveler on foot, settlements were 12 to 15 miles apart, and information was carried by hand from person to person on paper, in most cases shared by word of mouth. So this is almost like saying that if something happened to me, when a major event happened at my house, and I wanted to get the information to you guys, I would have to walk it there myself. And it would take me probably a day or two to walk to school, or like to like where you guys live, basically by school, and transfer that news to you. And it was never like an official document or a paper from like a government or anything like that. It was just basically me saying, hey, this happened, 2 days ago. I walked here and now I'm telling you. Okay? So, how did people in colonial America get their news? Okay? They got it mostly from, I'm going to say, travelers on foot. Okay? And then there were a couple other ways they got their news that were mentioned on page 12. But this is the one I'm going to use as my model for you guys, okay? So what you would do is, after travelers on foot, which obviously you guys can put into your own charts, you're going to find out all the other ways that they might have spread news, whether it's by horses or whatever, okay? Now, the second part of the chart requires you to go to pages 14 and 15. So I will turn to pages 14 and 15, which, if you're looking at it in the PDF, it's the second and third pages of chapter 2, okay? The family was traveling westward looking for a piece of land to farm and had chosen a spot not far from Isaac's place. Now, what I'm doing on pages 14 and 15 is I'm looking at what text evidence relates to the colonists getting news, okay? So if I'm talking about travelers on foot, or messages by horse, or whatever else you guys put on the chart, what evidence relates to colonists getting news? As he was taking his leave from a small shack where he lived, the family had given him the scrap of paper soft with wear from all the hands that had passed it through, so he could share the news with fellow travelers he met on his journey. They told him of other events they had heard of along the way. He tried to remember the details, but admitted that he wasn't much for conversation. Since there was so much noise from the sprats, as it seemed a dozen of them, my thinker fuzzed up like bad powder, and my recollector might not be at all, but I think they said there was another fight at a place called Bunker Hill, and the Patriot militia got whipped there and sent running when they saw the bayonets on the British soldiers' musks. So, in case you guys couldn't tell, there's clearly a particular way that the characters are speaking, and it sounds much different than how we would normally talk or even normally read these pages, okay? And it's kind of like triggering your mind into putting yourself into 1776 and how people might talk. But it was very clear here that notes were passed by travelers on foot. And if you look at the paragraph that starts with, as he was taking his leave from the small shack, right? You'll say, family, you'll see that it says family had given him a piece of paper soft with the wear from all the hands it passed through. Soft with all the wear of the hands it passed through. And you need that whole piece of evidence, because if you don't have that whole piece of evidence, you don't get the full explanation of what's going on over here. And you don't understand how people communicate it. Because what that part of the text is telling you is that travelers on foot would have a piece of paper with the information on it. They would go out, and they would try to go to the next town or the next family or whatever it might be. and pass that news on. And when they did, they just handed the piece of paper off. So every time a new person got the piece of paper, it was in that person's hand, in their pocket, they held it, whatever, and the paper started to get kind of old. Think about if you were passing a piece of paper back and forth with people throughout the school or throughout your neighborhood. It eventually get pretty messed up, right? But that's what it's saying, is that each person walked from town to town or house to house and passed news by hand, okay? So you guys will finish reading 14 and 15 and complete this chart based off of anything you find on page 12. And you will also be reading chapters 1 through 3 in total. You'll be doing Handout 22B and Handout 22A, all right? I will maybe see you guys later today for a live, depending on what time my meeting is. And if I don't see you, have a terrific weekend. And being that it is the weekend, you have plenty of time to read chapters 1 through 3. I hope you get work from everybody, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.